Welcome to Conflict Uncovered. I'm Elliot Chodoff, and over the next few minutes, I'll be covering what's going on in my neighborhood here in Israel and around us in the Middle East. It's July 15th, evening here in Israel, and it's been a rather tumultuous few days, aside from the attempt on Donald Trump's life, which I'm not going to cover today. Perhaps in a future discussion of politics in America. The big news over the past few days was the attempt that seems to have been successful, and I say that cautiously, in eliminating Mohammed Def, or his real name, Mohammed al-Masri, the leader and promoter of the Izzadin el-Qassam brigades, the military organization. I don't want to use the term military arm because Hamas is pretty much all a military organization. Come back to that in a moment, perhaps. But the military organization of Hamas who developed it from a deadly but somewhat ragtag terrorist organization to the military structure that we are now dismantling in Gaza, of brigades, battalions, armaments factories, warehouses, and the like, enmeshed in the civilian control that they also have and have had over Gaza. Def is an early member, or was an early member, hopefully we can speak of him in past tense, of Hamas. He joined only a couple of weeks after the organization came into existence at the end of 1987. Very, very quickly rose up through the ranks and became the leader and ultimately the mentor, director of the Izzadin el-Qassam brigades and the military structure of Hamas. He's one of the designers of the tunnel system, Hamas strategy, and of course he was instrumental in the planning and execution from headquarters, he wasn't physically out there, of the massacre, murder of October 7th in Israel. Israel has been trying to take Def out now for quite a number of years. He survived at least 7 attempts to eliminate him by Israel over the years. The 8th one took place over the weekend. He was visiting his very, very close friend, the commander of the brigade of Khan Yunis, in a home on the beach, one of his 3 homes, the commander's 3 homes, where he had been spending some time. And while Israel had tracked Hamas leaders to this place a few weeks ago, knowing that Def and he were very close friends, the Israeli leadership decided to wait and see if Def would come out and visit his friend, which he did. The word got out. It's not clear. Hamas is very, very concerned, and good for them that they are, that there was a leak, that they have human intelligence leaks among their leadership. And once it was confirmed that Def was there, it was also verified as best as can possibly be done that no hostages were in the area, and apparently there weren't. And ultimately the order was given, and a series of precision airstrikes were launched, essentially pulverizing the house. The Hamas Khan Yunis brigade commander was certainly killed. That's been confirmed. His and Def's bodyguards were killed. A bunch of other terrorists who happened to be hanging out in the area were killed. And Hamas claims that Def basically is okay and laughing at Israel for missing the 8th time. But all indications are, and evidence is seeping in from all sorts of sources, including today a statement was made by the American ambassador to Israel that the indicators are that Def did not survive this attack. This is a major strike, major loss for Hamas, both physically and morally. And it's worth spending a moment on this because there's always a great deal of discussion over what are called targeted killings or targeted assassinations. And first of all, let's be clear, this is not an assassination. Def is not a political leader. He was a military target and a perfectly legitimate one to be taken out, to be eliminated. In some cases, it's symbolic. The American elimination of Osama bin Laden was symbolic. It had great justification, although let's not confuse that with justice. He wasn't brought to justice. He was eliminated, but justifiably. He certainly had it coming, although by the time the Americans got to him, he really was not the central command leader of al-Qaeda anymore. He certainly still had his fingers in the pie, and he was still certainly in contact, but he was not the man at the center anymore. The elimination of bin Laden from a purely organizational point of view really had very little effect on al-Qaeda. On the other hand, the elimination of Def has enormous impact on Hamas, not only as a symbol, not only as somebody who has survived 7 attempts and has been able to sort of wave them off, even though he was severely injured in at least one of them, but the image of him being immortal could be shattered or would be shattered if in fact he's been taken out. But he's also a key player, a key organizer, a key planner, and it'll be very, very difficult for Hamas to replace him, certainly under the circumstances they have today. Now, nobody's irreplaceable. We've learned that throughout history. But taking out key operatives in times of organizational stress, and Hamas is certainly under stress at the moment, can have a crippling effect on the organization. And that would certainly be the case if, in fact, Def was taken out. His deputy, Marwan Issa, was taken out a few months ago. In other words, the number 2 who might normally have replaced him, even though not at his level of quality, is also not there anymore. So Hamas is going to have to dig deep into their reserves to find somebody at least to put into the position, but nobody with the skill, certainly not at this point, of Mohammed Def. Alongside that, the IDF finished an operation today in Gaza City, in 2 of the neighborhoods of Gaza. This is the ongoing counter-terrorist, counter-guerrilla operations that we've been seeing since the Israeli destruction of the military organization of Hamas in Gaza City, and then later in Khan Yunis, and now currently finishing up in Rafiah, a shift to guerrilla-style warfare, and the IDF not remaining in those areas, and rightfully so, in my opinion, holding terrain in enemy territory to allow their guerrilla fighters to pick off your troops is not a very good idea. But instead what we have is a sort of ebb and flow of the IDF pulling out, Hamas moving back in order to attempt to reestablish control, something they must do. And this is, I think, part of the Israeli strategy. Hamas has no alternative but to move back into these neighborhoods and try to reestablish themselves. In this particular case, the Israeli raid went in very quickly, encircled them in an UNRWA complex. And again, not a big surprise. Once their primary operations areas were destroyed, their next go-to is to go into UNRWA complexes, schools, and the like, offices, and use them, because that provides, of course, the double advantage of having a UN flag flying over them and the automatic condemnation of Israel, which has already come, for Israel attacking United Nations compounds. The fact that they're completely overrun with terrorists seems to slip everybody's mind when they're making those accusations. In any event, in this particular case, it was particularly unfortunate for the Hamas terrorists, because the tunnel network under this UNRWA complex was destroyed by the IDF the first time around. So when the Israeli tank forces surrounded the complex, the terrorists had no place to go, and a large number of them were killed and captured. Arms manufacturing centers that were being reestablished for drones and rockets were taken and destroyed. Attempts to reestablish their tunnel network were stopped, and overall a very, very successful operation for Israel. And just to conclude this section of it, and I'm going to just shift north for a couple of minutes, we have to keep in mind that the Israeli military, since the beginning of the maneuver in Gaza, has achieved astounding tactical successes. It continues to do so. Not perfect. There have certainly been tragedies along the way and errors along the way. But overall, given the scale of operation, urban warfare, guerrilla warfare, tactically, the IDF has performed very, very well. Having said that, other than continued tactical successes, Israel in general, the IDF in particular, are not showing a clear strategic objective of how to finish this once and for all. It's kind of open-ended, and that concerns me a bit, but we'll have to keep watching that as we go. The last couple of days up north have been quieter than usual, meaning that Hezbollah has fired fewer rockets and launched fewer drone attacks against Israel in general than they have in the past weeks. Nonetheless, there were a number of injured in the course of the last couple of days, and we really need to not measure the ebb and flow on a daily basis. We're seeing less in the news, and something we follow very, very closely, but that doesn't preclude the fact that Hezbollah is still very, very strong and well entrenched in South Lebanon. And tonight, tomorrow morning, that situation can change radically. I watch the news shows on TV, and they talk about, well, it's been quiet for the past couple of days. Maybe we're moving into a quieter period. Thinking that way is a huge mistake. There's a war going on. Wars have more intense days. They have less intense days. And while there aren't headline-making events going on a daily basis, that certainly doesn't mean that anything has shifted in any significant way. So here we are, once again, July 15th, evening in northern Israel. Quiet at the moment. Hopefully it'll remain so. And wishing all a good night.